The colony ship Horizon dropped out of faster-than-light travel, and for a moment, everything was silent. Captain Park Tai-ho stood at the bridge window watching the stars settle into place around them. After 18 months of travel, they had finally arrived. The new home for 12,000 human souls waited somewhere in this system. Then the alarm started screaming. "Captain, we have contacts," said Lieutenant Kong Do-yan, his fingers flying across the console. Multiple contacts. Hundreds of them. Tai-ho felt his stomach drop. On the main screen, the view zoomed out to show what surrounded them. Massive space stations orbited every planet in the system. Ships of impossible size moved between them, like fish in dark water. This system was not empty. It was occupied. "Get us out of here," Tai-ho ordered. Now. But before the helmsman could respond, the ship shuddered. A blue energy field wrapped around the horizon like a fist. They could not move. Dr. Kim Yuna ran onto the bridge, her tablet clutched to her chest. "Captain, I'm picking up a transmission. They're trying to communicate with us. Put it through." The main screen flickered. A face appeared, but it was not human. The creature had gray skin stretched over a skull that was too long, too narrow. Its eyes were black pools without pupils. When it spoke, its voice was cold and smooth, like ice sliding over stone. "Attention, unknown vessel. You have entered the territory of the Veltheran Dominion. Under our law, any uncatalogued species found within our borders becomes property of the Dominion. You will surrender your ship and yourselves. Resistance will result in immediate termination." The bridge fell silent. Tai-ho looked at his crew. He saw fear in their eyes, but also something else. They were looking to him, waiting for him to tell them what to do. "How many species have they done this to?" He asked Yuna quietly. She checked her tablet, scrolling through the data she had pulled from the alien network. Her face went pale. 43. They've enslaved 43 species across 3 galaxies. Some of them have been slaves for over 1,000 years. Tai-ho closed his eyes. 12,000 people depended on him. Men, women, children, families who had left everything behind to build a new life among the stars. They had escaped wars, pollution, and a dying Earth. They had come so far, and now they faced this. Captain Do-yoon said Dominion warships are approaching. They're preparing to dock. Tai-ho opened his eyes. He thought about his wife, who had died 2 years before the mission launched. He thought about his daughter, somewhere on this ship, probably scared and wondering what was happening. He thought about all the generations of humans who had fought and bled and died so that their children might live free. "No," he said. Do-yan looked at him. "Sir, we don't surrender. We don't kneel." Tai-ho turned to face his crew. "I won't lie to you. We can't win a fight against them. We don't have the weapons, the ships, or the numbers. But I will not hand our people over to be slaves. Not today. Not ever." He pressed the ship-wide communication button. His voice echoed through every corridor, every room, every corner of the horizon. "This is Captain Park Tai-ho. By now, you all know what's happening. An alien empire wants to take us as slaves. They think we'll surrender because we're outgunned. They think we'll kneel because we're afraid." Paused. "They don't know us. They don't know what humans are made of. I'm asking all of you to stand with me. Not to fight a battle we can't win, but to show them something they've never seen before. A species that refuses to break." When the Dominion soldiers boarded the ship, they expected submission. They had done this thousands of times before. Every species reacted the same way: fear, then bargaining, then acceptance. The process was simple and efficient. But when Lord Synthal, commander of the Dominion fleet, walked onto the bridge of the horizon, he found something different. Captain Tai-ho stood in the center of the bridge, his crew arranged behind him. None of them were armed. None of them were running. They simply stood there, looking at him with steady eyes. "You are the leader?" Synthal asked. "I am." "Then kneel, and your people will be processed quickly. Resist, and I will make examples." Tai-ho did not move. "We don't kneel." Synthal tilted his head, studying the strange creature before him. In 800 years of service to the Dominion, he had never heard those words. Threats, yes. Begging, certainly. But this calm, quiet refusal was something new. You misunderstand your situation, Synthel said. You have no choice. There's always a choice, Taiho replied. You can kill us, but you can't make us slaves. Not really. Because a slave has to accept that they're beaten, and we never will. Synthel felt something he had not felt in centuries' curiosity. These creatures were primitive, weak, and utterly outmatched. Yet they stood before him as if they were equals. He decided to teach them the truth. Bring 10 of them, he ordered his soldiers. From the lower decks, civilians. Minutes later, 10 humans were dragged onto the bridge. Men and women, old and young. They were forced to their knees in front of Taiho. Last chance, Synthel said. Kneel, and they live. Taiho looked at the prisoners. One of them, an old man with gray hair, looked back at him. There were tears in the old man's eyes, but he shook his head slowly. Don't do it, the gesture said. Don't give them what they want. Taiho's heart broke, but he stood firm. We don't kneel. Synthel raised his weapon. One by one, he executed the prisoners. Each shot echoed through the bridge like thunder. When it was done, 10 bodies lay on the floor. Taiho's uniform was stained with blood that was not his own. The Dominion commander holstered his weapon and looked at Taiho with something like respect. Interesting, he said. You really would rather die than submit. You still don't understand, Taiho said, his voice shaking with rage and grief. This isn't about dying. This is about what we live for. You've just shown every person on this ship exactly what you are. And now they'll never stop fighting you. Never. Synthel smiled, a cold, empty expression. We shall see. Take them all to Kelthar 9. Let the processing camps break what pride remains. As Dominion soldiers dragged Taiho away, he looked back at the bodies of the fallen. He memorized their faces. He would carry them with him into whatever darkness awaited, and in his heart a fire began to burn. Not the fire of hope, not yet, but the fire of promise. He would make the Dominion regret this day. He would make them pay for every drop of human blood they had spilled. This was not the end. This was the beginning. 6 months had passed since the humans arrived at Kelthar-9. The prison moon was a gray and lifeless place. Mountains of black rock rose from dusty plains. The sky was always dark, lit only by the distant glow of a dying star. The Dominion had built their slave processing facility here because escape was impossible. There was nowhere to run. Overseer Dravix stood in his tower and watched the human work cruise through his viewing screen. He had broken 37 species on this moon. His methods were simple and proven. Separate the strong from the weak. Work them until their bodies fail. Destroy their hope piece by piece until they forget they ever had names. It always worked. Within 3 months, any species would become obedient. Within 6, they would become grateful for the smallest kindness. But the humans were not breaking. Dravix zoomed his screen onto Mining Sector 7. A woman named Shin Mingi was leading a work crew into the tunnels. She was small and thin, her body worn down by months of hard labor. But she walked with her head high, and the others followed her without question. He had tried everything. He had reduced their food. He had extended their work hours. He had punished random prisoners for the smallest mistakes. None of it worked. The humans did not fight back openly. They were too smart for that. But they did not submit either. They moved slowly, broke equipment by accident, lost supplies in ways that could never be proven as sabotage, and they sang. Dravix hated the singing most of all. The humans had work songs that they hummed while they labored. The melodies seemed innocent, but he knew they carried hidden messages. He had tried to ban the singing, but it only drove it underground. Now they communicated through hand signals, through patterns in their work, through codes he could not crack. In the agricultural dome on the other side of the facility, a man named Han Ji-hoon was tending crops. He was quiet and gentle, the kind of prisoner that overseers usually ignored. He smiled at the guards, thanked them for small mercies, never caused trouble. What the guards did not know was that Jehun had memorized every inch of the facility. He knew the patrol schedules better than the patrols themselves. He knew which doors were weak, which cameras had blind spots, and which guards could be distracted. Every day, he passed this information to Minji's network through a system of messages hidden in supply crates. Captain Taiho was held in solitary confinement in a cell deep beneath the main complex. The Dominion believed that isolation would destroy his spirit. They checked on him once a week, expecting to find a broken man begging for contact. Instead, they found him exercising, waiting. Taiho had turned his cell into a planning room. He scratched marks into the wall to track time. He listened to the guards' footsteps and learned their rhythms. He built a map of the facility in his mind, using only the sounds that reached his cell: the hum of machinery, the distant rumble of mining equipment, the echo of boots on metal floors. He was not waiting to be rescued. He was preparing. One day, Dravix decided to visit Taiho himself. He wanted to understand these strange creatures who refused to accept their fate. The cell door opened, and Dravix stepped inside. Taiho sat on the floor, his back against the wall. He looked thin and tired, but his eyes were sharp. "Your people continue to resist," Dravix said. "It is pointless. In time, all species accept their place in the Dominion." Taiho smiled. It was not a happy smile. "How many species have you processed on this moon?" 37. "And how many of them are still fighting after 6 months?" Dravix did not answer. The truth was uncomfortable. The humans were the first. "You don't understand us," Taiho said. "You think resistance is about winning? It's not. It's about who we are. We've been slaves before on our own world. We've been conquered, beaten, and told we were nothing. And every time we fought back, not because we knew we would win, but because fighting is what makes us human." Dravix studied him for a long moment. "You would rather die than serve?" "No. I would rather live fighting than live kneeling. There's a difference." After leaving the cell, Dravix returned to his tower and did something he had never done before. He sent a report to the Dominion High Council admitting that he could not break the humans. "These creatures appeared to be psychologically incompatible with servitude," he wrote. "Standard processing methods have failed. I recommend termination." The Council's response came within hours. They agreed. If the humans could not be slaves, they would be examples. The execution was scheduled for dawn 3 days from now. All 12,000 humans would be killed in their barracks while they slept. The order was classified at the highest level. No one was supposed to know, but Jehun knew. He had been delivering food to the overseer's quarters when he heard 2 guards talking about the execution. He kept his face calm, finished his work, and walked away slowly. But inside, his heart was racing. That night, he passed the message to Minji through their secret network. The word spread through the camps like fire through dry grass. Within hours, every human on Kelthorne knew what was coming. Minji called a secret meeting in the deepest part of the mines. 50 prisoners gathered in a chamber lit by stolen chemical lights. Their faces were thin and dirty, their bodies marked by months of abuse. But their eyes were alive. "We have 3 days," Minji said. 3 days to do something that has never been done in the history of the Dominion. "We're going to break out," the young woman spoke up. "How?" "We have no weapons, no ships. The guards outnumber us 10 to 1. "We have something better," Minji replied. "We have each other, and we have something to fight for." She looked around the chamber at the faces of her people. "I won't promise we'll survive, but I promise we'll die free. And maybe, just maybe, we'll light a fire that the Dominion can't put out." Deep in his cell, Taiho felt a change in the air. He did not know what was happening, but he knew something was coming. The rhythm of the guards' footsteps was different. The sounds of the facility were wrong. He stood up and pressed his hand against the cold metal wall. "Hold on," he whispered to the humans he could not see. "Whatever happens, hold on." 3 days. The countdown had begun. The night before the execution, the moon of Kelthorne was quiet. Guards walked their patrols. Machines hummed in the darkness. The Dominion believed everything was under control. They were wrong. In the tunnels beneath the mining sector, Corporal Yun Siwoo had been hiding for 6 months. He was one of 30 soldiers who had escaped capture during the initial boarding of the Horizon. While his fellow humans were taken to the processing facility, Siwoo and his team had fled into the moon's natural cave system for half a year. They had survived on stolen supplies and determination. They had watched. They had waited. And they had gathered weapons from dead guards. One piece at a time. Now, Siwoo stood before his fighters in a cavern lit by pale blue crystals. 20 men and women armed with Dominion rifles and mining tools. It was not much, but it was enough. "Tonight, we take back our people," Siwoo said. "The enemy expects us to die quietly. Let's show them how humans die on our feet, fighting." At midnight, the uprising began. Han Ji-hoon made his move first. For weeks, he'd been adding a special compound to the guards' water supplies, something he had grown from the very crops he tended. It was not poison. It was worse. It caused the guards to become confused, slow, unable to think clearly. When the fighting started, half the enemy force was already compromised. In the mining sector, Shin Min-ji gave the signal. Her workers had spent months weakening support beams and planting explosive charges taken from blasting equipment. Now she pressed the trigger. The explosions ripped through the transit tunnels, cutting the facility in half. Fire and smoke filled the passages. Guards who tried to reach the human barracks found their paths. Blocked by collapsed stone, Siwoo's fighters emerged from the caves and struck the confused enemy from behind. They moved fast and hard, taking weapons from fallen guards and freeing prisoners as they went. The humans did not fight like soldiers. They fought like people with nothing left to lose. Deep in the facility, Dr. Beeknari was leading the sick and wounded to safety. She was 73 years old, and her hands shook from age and exhaustion. But her voice was steady as she guided hundreds of people through smoke-filled corridors. "Stay together," she called out. "Help each other. No one gets left behind." The Dominion tried to respond, but everything was chaos. Their communications were jammed by equipment that Minji's engineers had modified. Their reinforcements could not reach the fighting. Their commanders could not understand. How slaves had organized such a coordinated attack. Siwoo reached the solitary confinement block. He blasted through the security door and ran down the corridor until he found Taiho's cell. "Captain," he said, breathing hard, "we're breaking out." Taiho looked at him with eyes that held 6 months of darkness. Then he smiled a real smile, the first one in a long time. "What's the plan?" "We take the communication tower." "Dr. Kim is there?" "She survived, sir. She's going to send a message to Earth. Tell them what happened to us. Ask for help. And if help doesn't come..." Siwoo handed him a rifle. "Then we make them remember us." They fought their way to the surface. The facility was burning. Bodies lay in the corridors, both human and Velthrin. The cost was already terrible. But the humans pressed forward. When they reached the communication tower, they found Yuna inside. She looked different now, harder, with scars on her arms that told stories Taiho did not want to hear. But she was alive, and she was working. "Taiho," she said without looking up, "I need 5 more minutes." "You have 3?" Siwoo said, checking the window. "Enemy reinforcements are coming." Outside, the sky lit up with new stars. Ships were dropping from Orbetta, full Dominion battle fleet led by High Commander Corvex. The response was overwhelming. Thousands of soldiers poured from landing craft, surrounding the facility with perfect precision. Corvex had been sent to oversee the extermination of the humans. When he learned of the uprising, he had been furious. Now he would end this personally. All human forces, his voice boomed through the facility's speakers. "Surrender immediately, or face complete annihilation. You have 60 seconds. Taiho pressed the intercom button in the tower. "This is Captain Park Taiho. I have a message for High Commander Corvex." He paused, looking out at the army surrounding them. "We don't kneel. We never will. If you want us, come and get us." He released the button and turned to Yuna. "Is the message ready?" She was crying. Tears rolled down her face, but her hands were steady on the controls. "Everything. I'm sending everything. Our coordinates. Our story. A call for help. Anyone who hears this will know what happened here. Send it." She pressed the button. Somewhere in space, a signal began racing toward the stars, toward Earth, toward freedom, toward hope. The Dominion soldiers breached the tower's outer walls. Explosions shook the floor. Dust and debris filled the air. Taiho grabbed a weapon and positioned himself at the door. Doyen appeared beside him, wounded but still standing. Minji came next, then Siwoo, then a dozen others. They formed a line, ready to defend the tower with their lives. "Whatever happens," Taiho said, "know that I'm proud of you. All of you. We showed them what humans are made of. Now we hold." The first wave of soldiers came through the door. The humans opened fire. The battle was brutal. For every enemy they killed, 2 more appeared. The humans were pushed back, step by step, until they stood in a circle around Yuna and her equipment. Bodies covered the floor. Blood stained the walls. Doyen took a shot to the shoulder but kept fighting. Mingi used an empty rifle as a club when her ammunition ran out. Siwoo threw himself in front of a grenade, saving 3 of his fighters at the cost of his own legs. And still, Yuna worked. The message was broadcasting on repeat, cycling through every frequency she could find. Even if she died, even if they all died, the signal would keep going. Finally, Corvex himself entered the tower. He stepped over the bodies of his soldiers, looking at the handful of humans still standing. "Impressive," he said. "Truly, I have never seen a slave species fight so hard for nothing." Taiho lowered his empty weapon. His body was broken. His friends were dying around him. But his spirit was undefeated. "It's not nothing," he said. "You'll understand someday. When the galaxy rises up against you. When everything you built falls apart, remember this moment, and know that it started here. With us." Corvex raised his weapon. But before he could fire, a new sound filled the air, a transmission from space. "Dominion Fleet, this is the United Earth Navy. Release our people. This is your only warning." Corvex froze. He looked at the screen on the wall, and his black eyes widened. Ships were appearing in orbit. Human ships. Dozens of them. And behind them, more contact ships of other designs, other species. The message had been heard, and the galaxy was responding. Taiho fell to his knees, not from defeat, but from relief. "Told you," he whispered. "We never stop fighting." Outside, the battle for Kelthor 9 was about to begin. Admiral Cho Yongi stood on the bridge of the battleship Dawn of Earth, watching Kelthor 9 grow larger on the view screen. Her fleet had traveled faster than any human ships had ever gone. Pushing their engines beyond all safety limits, her daughter had been on the horizon for 18 months. Yunji had believed her daughter was dead. Then the message came, a desperate broadcast from a prison moon, telling the story of what the Dominion had done. Telling the galaxy that humans were still fighting. Yunji had assembled a fleet in 3 weeks. Every ship that could fly, every soldier that could fight. The governments of Earth had argued about the mission, called it suicide, demanded caution. Yunji had ignored them all. Her people were dying. Nothing else mattered. "Admiral," her communications officer said, "we're receiving signals from unknown vessels approaching from the galactic rim. They're not Dominion." "Show me." The screen shifted. Yanji felt her breath catch in her throat. 40 ships emerged from the darkness of space. They were massive, covered in scars and patches from centuries of hiding and running. Their design was alien long and curved like blades, with engines that burned a deep purple. "Incoming transmission," the officer said. A face appeared on the screen. The creature had 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern, skin like polished bronze, and a voice that rumbled like distant thunder. "Human fleet, I am Maleth the Unchained, leader of the Rithyon resistance. We heard your message. 200 years ago, the Dominion took our world and made us slaves. We have been running ever since, waiting for something, anything that might give us hope." He paused, and something like a smile crossed his alien face. "Then we heard your broadcast. A species that refused to kneel. A species that fights when fighting seems impossible. We are done running. Point us at the enemy. Yunji felt tears forming in her eyes, but she kept her voice steady. Welcome to the fight, Malith. Form up on our flank. More ships appeared. The Synthery brought 30 vessels, sleek and silent. Crewed by beings who had pretended to be loyal servants of the Dominion while secretly preserving ancient weapons. The Kelmith came with 15 heavy cruisers, their people still bearing the brands of slavery on their skin. A dozen other species answered the callsome with only a single ship. But all willing to fight, High Commander Corvex watched the coalition form from his flagship. His sensors counted over 200 vessels, representing 17 different species. It was impossible. The Dominion had ruled for 2,000 years without facing such an alliance. Contact the home fleet, he ordered. Request immediate reinforcements. Sir, his officer replied. There's a problem. Uprisings have been reported on 14 colony worlds. The home fleet is responding to internal threats. The message from Kelthornine had done more than call for help. It had inspired rebellion across the entire empire. On the surface of Kelthornine, the humans had been fighting for 3 weeks. The uprising had taken the facility, but Corvex's forces had surrounded them. Each day brought new attacks. Each night brought more casualties. Captain Taiho stood on the wall of the main barracks looking out at the enemy lines. Half of his people were dead. The rest were exhausted, starving, and running low on ammunition. But they held on, Captain Duin said, limping to his side. A bandage covered the wound on his shoulder, stained dark with blood. The enemy is preparing another assault. How many fighters do we have left? 300 able to hold a weapon? Maybe another 100 who can support. Taiho nodded slowly. When this started, they had been 12,000. Now they were 400, standing against an army of millions. We hold, he said. Every hour we survive is another hour for help to arrive. In the tunnels below, Shin Mingi was leading the remaining engineers in a desperate project. They had found an old transport ship in a buried hangar, damaged, barely functional, but perhaps able to fly. If we can get this working, she said, we can evacuate the children and the wounded. Han Jahun looked up from his work on the ship's engine. And the rest of us? Minji met his eyes. The rest of us buy them time. Above the moon, Admiral Yunji gave the order to attack. The battle began with fire and thunder. Human ships charged at the Dominion fleet, their weapons blazing. The Rithian vessels cut through enemy formations like knives, their ancient hatred given form. The Synthery deployed weapons that had been hidden for generations, tearing through Dominion shields. But the Dominion was massive. For every ship destroyed, 3 more took its place. The coalition was fighting the largest military force in the galaxy. They were losing. On the dawn of Earth, explosions rocked the ship. Damage reports flooded in. A quarter of the fleet was already gone. Admiral, her tactical officer, said, "We can't break through. Their defensive line is too strong." Yunji stared at the moon below. Somewhere down there, her daughter might still be alive. Somewhere down there, humans were fighting and dying. Then we go through, she said. All ships, maximum speed. We're punching a hole to the surface. The dawn of Earth accelerated toward the enemy line. The Dominion flagship moved to intercept. Corvex himself commanded the vessel. Determined to destroy this troublesome human leader, the 2 ships exchanged fire at close range. The dawn of Earth shuddered under the assault. Fires broke out across multiple decks, but Yunji held course. Sir, the tactical officer shouted, the enemy flagship is preparing a killing shot. If we stay on this heading, I know. Yunji's voice was calm. Signal all ships, get to the surface. Protect our people. The Dominion flagship fired. A beam of pure energy lanced through space, aimed directly at the dawn of Earth's reactor. But before it could strike, a Rithian vessel threw itself into the path of the beam. Malith's ship, the Voice of Freedom, took the blast meant for Yanji. The ancient vessel broke apart, scattering debris across the void. Yunji screamed. A weak signal came through Malith's voice, broken by static. 200 years of slavery. 200 years of waiting. This is how a Rithian dies. Free. The voice of freedom exploded. But its sacrifice had bought the Coalition precious seconds. Human landing craft broke through the Dominion line and began descending toward Kelthornine. On the surface, Tahoe saw the sky light up with falling ships. Some were burning, crashing into the moon's surface. Others landed intact, their doors opening to reveal human soldiers in combat armor. For the first time in months, he allowed himself to hope. Dr. Beeknari was treating wounded in the medical bunker when the first rescue teams reached her. A young soldier in Earth's military uniform stopped in the doorway, staring at the rows of injured prisoners. "My God," he whispered. "What did they do to you?" Nari looked up at him with tired eyes. "They tried to break us. It didn't work." The battle raged for hours. Dominion forces pushed back against the landing troops. Human and alien soldiers fought side by side in the corridors of the facility. Slowly, step by step, the Coalition advanced. In orbit, the dawn of Earth drifted, heavily damaged, but still alive. Yoonji was pulled from the wreckage of her bridge by rescue crews from a Synthuri vessel. She had a broken arm, burns on her face, and a smile that nothing could erase. "Did we win?" she asked. The Synthuri medic looked down at her. "Not yet. But we're not losing anymore." Below, on the surface of Kelthornine, Taiho finally saw human soldiers reaching his position. The enemy was retreating. The impossible was happening. He fell to his knees, not from weakness, but from the weight of everything he had carried. A young soldier approached him. "Captain Park Taiho. I'm Sergeant Kim from the Earth Rescue Force. We're here to take you home." Taiho looked up at her. "Home," he repeated, as if the word was foreign. "I'm not sure I remember what that means." The sergeant helped him to his feet. "Then let us remind you." Overhead, the Dominion fleet was breaking. Corvex's flagship burned in the void. The empire that had ruled for 2,000 years was beginning to crumble, and it had started with a single word: no. The Battle of Kelthornine lasted 17 hours, when it ended. The Dominion fleet was scattered across the void, broken, burning, retreating into the darkness of space. High Commander Corvex's flagship had been captured, its commander taken prisoner. For the first time in 2,000 years, the Velthran Dominion had been defeated in open battle. But the war was not over. Council Speaker Varanthos, Supreme Leader of the Dominion, watched the reports from his throne room on the capital world. His empire was crumbling. Rebellions had spread to 47 planets. Species that had served for centuries were rising up, inspired by the humans' defiance. How is this possible? He demanded of his advisors. One primitive species, one failed slave capture, and now everything we built is falling apart. None of them had an answer. None of them understood what had happened. They had conquered and enslaved thousands of worlds. They had broken entire civilizations, yet somehow, this small group of humans had lit a fire that was consuming the galaxy. Varanthos made a decision. If he could not have victory, he would have revenge. "Prepare the extermination fleet," he ordered. "We will burn every world that has joined this rebellion. Starting with the human homeworld, starting with Earth." The Coalition learned of the plan within hours. Spies on a dozen worlds reported the same message. The Dominion was gathering its remaining strength for one final strike. Earth would be the target. Admiral Cho Yoonji called a war council aboard the battered Dawn of Earth. The ship had been repaired enough to fly, though scars from the battle still marked its hull. Representatives from every species in the Coalition gathered in the conference room, Rithian, Synthuri, Kelmuth, and a dozen others. "The Dominion fleet is 3 times our size," Yoonji reported. "They're bringing everything they have left. If they reach Earth, they will destroy it." Captain Tayo stood at the back of the room, still recovering from his injuries. His body was thin, his face lined with exhaustion. But his eyes burned with the same fire that had carried him through the nightmare of Kelthornine. "Then we stopped them," he said. "We didn't come this far to lose everything now. How?" asked a Kelmuth commander. "We cannot match their numbers." Taiho stepped forward. "We don't have to. The Dominion thinks this war is about power, who has more ships, more soldiers, more weapons. But that's not what this war is about. This war is about will, about who's fighting for something real. He looked around the room at the gathered species beings who had been enemies, slaves, strangers. Now they stood together, united by a shared cause. The Dominion fights because they're ordered to. We fight because we choose to. We fight for our homes, our families, everything we hold dear. That's a power they can't measure with their sensors. Malith had survived the destruction of his ship, rescued by human crews, and saved by Dr. Beeknari's medical skill. He stood with a support frame around his damaged body, but his voice was strong. The human speaks truth. My people hid for 200 years because we believed resistance was hopeless. But hope is not about probability. Hope is about choice. Today, I choose to believe we can win. One by one, the other commanders voiced their agreement. The coalition would fight, not because victory was certain, but because some things were worth fighting for. Even when victory seemed impossible, the two fleets met at the edge of Earth's solar system. The Dominion came with 5,000 ships. Arranged in perfect formation, Council Speaker Varanthos commanded from the greatest vessel ever built, a dreadnought so massive it blocked out the light of stars. The coalition came with everything they had, 1,500 vessels. Crewed by 17 species, led by humans who had learned to fight when all hope seemed lost. The battle began at dawn. Earth time, Yonji commanded the human fleet from the dawn of Earth, coordinating attacks with Rethian and Synthri squadrons. Doyan, recovered from his wounds, led a strike force that targeted Dominion command ships. Shinmengi commanded an engineering team that repaired damaged vessels in the middle of combat, keeping broken ships fighting, and Taiho was on the ground, preparing Earth's defenses in case the fleet failed. The fighting was devastating. Ships exploded on both sides, filling space with debris and fire. The coalition was outnumbered, outgunned, pressed back toward Earth by the sheer weight of the Dominion assault. But something was happening that Varanthos had not predicted. Across the Dominion fleet, cracks were appearing. Crews composed of slave species began to turn against their masters. Ships changed sides in the middle of battle. Communications filled with voices speaking words that had been forbidden for 2,000 years. We heard the message from Kelthurnine. We know what the humans did. Today, we are free. The rebellion had spread to the enemy fleet itself. Varanthos watched in disbelief as a quarter of his forces turned against him. His perfect formation shattered. His commanders were overwhelmed by enemies from within. "This is impossible," he screamed. "These slaves should not be able to resist." His ship shuddered as human weapons struck its shields. Warning alarms filled the bridge. Damage reports flooded in from every system. A communication channel opened. Captain Taiho's face appeared on the screen. Council Speaker Taiho said, "I promised you once that you would understand someday. That day has come." Varanthos stared at this human, this creature from a primitive world who had somehow destroyed an empire that had stood for 2 millennia. Why? He demanded. Why fight so hard? Why inspire others to throw away their lives? What makes your species different? Taiho's answer was simple. We have things worth dying for. Family, freedom, each other. You've conquered 40 species, but you've never understood why some things can't be taken. You can kill us, but you can't take away what we fight for. And as long as that's true, you can never really win. Varanthos had no response. He had spent his entire life believing that power came from domination, that civilization meant control. He had never imagined that a species could draw strength from something as simple as love. The Dominion flagship's shields collapsed. Human boarding parties breached the hull. Within hours, Varanthos was captured, and the greatest military force in the galaxy had fallen. 1 year later, a new galactic council was formed. Humans stood among its founders, alongside Rithians, Synthri Kelmuth, and the many other species who had earned their freedom in the war. The prison moon of Kelthurnine was transformed into a memorial. A wall of black stone bore the names of every human who had died there 4,712 souls who had given everything so that others might live free. Captain Park Tai-ho, now Earth's ambassador to the new council, stood before the memorial with the people who had survived the nightmare beside him. Dr. Kim Yuna was there, her eyes wet with tears. Han Ji-hoon stood quietly, his gentle face marked by memories. Shin Mingi held the hand of a child she had rescued from the camps. Admiral Cho Yunji walked with a cane, her body still bearing the scars of the battle that had saved her world. And Dr. Beeknari, 94 years old now, sat in a chair and smiled at the future she had helped to build. Doyen stood at attention, his uniform bearing the medals of a hero. Beside him was a new generation of soldiers, young people from a dozen worlds. United by the ideals that humans had carried across the stars, a Rithian child approached Tai-ho. She was small, her bronze skin still smooth with youth, her 4 eyes wide with wonder. "Are you the one who started the fire?" she asked. Tai-ho knelt down to meet her eyes. He thought about everything that had happened, the capture, the camps, the uprising, the war. He thought about the friends he had lost and the ones who still stood beside him. He thought about the galaxy that had changed because a handful of humans had refused to kneel. "No," he said softly. "We just refused to let it go out." The child smiled, and in her smile, Tai-ho saw the future, a galaxy where freedom was no longer a dream, where species worked together instead of conquering each other, where the fire that humans had carried would burn for generations to come. Behind him, the names on the memorial caught the light of distant stars. Each name was a story. Each story was a sacrifice. And together, they formed something greater than any empire. They formed hope. Tai-ho stood and looked up at the sky. Somewhere out there, new worlds waited to be discovered. New challenges waited to be faced. And whatever came next, humanity would face it the way they always had, together, for everything they held dear.